Outside the Letterbox, new episode. Getting used to not saying Fastcast podcast.
I know, it's been so long since we've done an Outside the Letterbox episode, and in that time we've done 6 episodes of the Fastcast podcast.
So here we are. This is Joe and Nick, the same guys on the Fastcast podcast, only now we're doing Outside the Letterbox and talking about a Fast and the Furious movie.
This is like the ultimate crossover.
But the only difference, what makes this different, is that we talk about other things than just a Fast and the Furious movie. Paul is not joining us today because he did not see our film of the day, which is Furious 7. So it's just Nick and I, which I guess now we're huge Fast and Furious nerds, I guess.
Yes, we know everything about these movies.
We are the experts. But before we get into our film of the day, we're going to talk about what we watched, a couple films, just what we've been going over, and then film news. Just some stuff that happened. You know the drill. If you heard this podcast before, you know what's going down. So I guess just to get started,
do we want to, since this is our first podcast in a long time, I don't know if you've watched any movies in theaters. Basically, the reason we haven't done one of these in a long time is because Joe went off and decided to have a baby. In fact, I kind of took him out from going to the movies a lot. And then I've been busy, Paul's been busy. We've both seen movies in theaters, but we never really saw the same movie in theaters. Like I saw Chappie.
Which I still haven't seen.
Yeah, but then I think Paul saw Cinderella. And then you saw Run All Night, and then Paul and I saw It Follows, and we actually tried to do a podcast for It Follows, but that never happened, so I just did.
That didn't follow through?
No, we did not follow through on an It Follows podcast. So I don't know if you want to, before we just get into what we've been watching recently, I don't know if you want to give a brief thought on what you've seen in theaters since the last time we podcasted.
Well, what was the last podcast? The only thing I can think about is Run All Night, to be perfectly honest.
The last podcast we did was the Oscar prediction once. That was like a month and a half ago.
Oh my gosh.
Birdman won, by the way.
Yeah, Birdman won the Oscars.
Hey.
Who won the pool? That was you, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was me. I have my copy of Whiplash here, along with the note that Paul attached to it, which was very emotionally vulgar, but I will cherish it till the day I die. Not really. It'll probably get thrown out in the next couple weeks. But yeah. So thank you for that, Joe. That's, you were the reason why I won that.
Yeah, I actually still owe Paul Paul money for that.
Well, I was gonna say you shouldn't have said that because then you could have gotten away with it probably for
forever until I hear about it on the next podcast that Paul is part of also.
So you saw Run All Night. Can you just give a brief rundown of that?
Run All Night, basically, I was super excited for this movie. It was one of my most anticipated movies of this year, just because I love Liam Neeson movies. I loved Walking on the Tombstones. And I love this kind of more dramatic version of his action movies that he's been doing recently. Which, again, I don't talk about it too many times in this show, but I freaking love Walking on the Tombstones. It's just, I don't know, it hits all the right notes, and in addition to being a fun action movie, it's just a great thriller and drama on top of that, and Liam Neeson really brings his A game. So I was hoping for kind of a repeat of that, because this one looked very similar in tone to that. Run All Night was fun. It's very 80s inspired. In fact, most of the movie looks like it was shot in the 80s, to be perfectly honest, except for some weird like wide shots. The camera does this thing where to bounce around from location to location, the camera like zooms out and does like this Google Maps thing and like tracks to the next location or something like that. It's really weird. But the movie itself it's fun. You get to see Liam Neeson. He's a drunk asshole who hits on other people's wives in a Santa suit.
Yeah, that's what I heard. I heard something about the Santa suit, and I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah. He's in a Santa suit making crude remarks to other people's wives, and
so this is like if Bad Santa were an action movie.
I think it would be played by Liam Neeson. But Honestly, there's not really a whole lot to the movie. It's fun, and it works for what they go for, as kind of an 80s esque action movie, that takes place within a single night, but they don't really do a whole lot with it. It gets really silly, which I was okay with. They have this hitman character, that just kind of he becomes kind of ridiculous. He's like the emotionless, um, hitman sort of thing. But that was a lot of fun.
He's like Jason Statham in Furious 7.
Yeah, kind of, except for with no personality whatsoever. But yeah, I mean, it's a sweet little movie. Ed Harris is freaking great in this movie. He gives some really dramatic performances. The movie's full of plot holes. What gets the movie off going on a start doesn't even really make a whole lot of sense. But I had fun. I enjoyed it. I'm glad I saw it.
Nice.
It wasn't that good, but whatever.
So I saw Chappie. I guess it would be like a little over a month ago now, and
Everybody shit on Chappie.
yeah. Well, it's not a good movie, but um, it's such a tough movie to talk about. I wish if we had had a podcast on that, I feel like we would have gotten into some interesting discussions. And like I wrote an article not reviewing the movie, but more on Neil Blomkamp because Chappie came out and there was the whole like, oh, Alien 5 concept art and like he was gonna do that movie and all the after effects of people not caring for Elysium and stuff, and kind of people were really piling on him in a negative way that I just kind of thought was unfair because like District 9 is an awesome movie. Um, I still think it holds up. I watched it like a year or two ago, and obviously it didn't match the initial experience that I had in the theater, but it still held like all the stuff I loved about the movie the first time around held true. Um, so yeah, like Elysium, I didn't think was that great, and Chappie, like I think Elysium and Chappie like all have really interesting ideas and just never um, pay off kind of in the way you want them to. Whereas District 9, I feel like every promise that it made, it fulfilled and surpassed and whatever. And I'm okay to forgive that because this is only his third movie, and I don't want to basically reiterate the whole article I wrote. But there are a lot of famous directors who you look at their early stuff and it's like, oh, this is not that great or not that noteworthy. And it's like if we had judged those directors that harshly back then, not that you can't critique them, but I feel like a lot of people are like, oh, he should just like stop being a director or he should stop like whatever. And it's like, no, like, there should be a good back and forth between criticism and, the filmmakers where they realize, oh, like this is stuff that isn't working and I need to work on it and whatever. But if we don't kind of give him the chance to do that, then how can you ever expect him to be good? So Chappie, yeah, Chappie was a movie that was full of good ideas and then just never followed through. It was also one of the most unnecessary R-rated movies ever because it's one of those weird things where I remember when they pitched the idea and I thought, oh, like he's actually going to be doing like a more friendly movie. And then the posters started coming out and the trailers and all that stuff. And then I was like, oh, I know what I think this movie's going to be. And especially when the first trailer came out, because a lot of people weren't down on the first trailer. And I wasn't really either, except I thought it was hiding what the real movie was going to be about. And I thought it would be a movie about these people who are like, oh, artificial intelligence, let's do this thing. And people are like, no, you shouldn't do that. They do it anyway. And then they create, this character who's basically like a child, but then the child goes bad and just starts doing like terrible stuff, and then in the end everyone's like, oh yeah, artificial intelligence, it was a bad idea. Spoiler alert, that's not what this movie is. Chappie does do some bad stuff, and those are actually the best scenes are when they have to provoke him to do bad stuff. um, but then in the end it all kind of comes down to, oh, AI is the future, it's a good thing, and Chappie's just misunderstood and he's special, and and it was just one of those things where it's like, oh, it was like it was so close to being a potentially good movie. Like this is a movie that's like a draft or two away for being a good movie, but just as it is right now, yeah. I would still, I don't know if I would recommend it to a lot of people, but I know like Joe, I would probably still say you should check it out because I know it's close to your type of movie. Um, but yeah, so Chappie, not that great. But
Yeah, I'll probably watch it at some point. Probably check it out on.
oh, I forgot to mention. Yeah, so I was saying why it was unnecessarily R-rated because like it's not that violent of a movie. Like Neil Blomkamp's movies are usually really violent. So really, the only thing wrong with the movie was just like, oh, like they just drop a bunch of f-bombs and whatnot. But then at the very end, without spoiling much, basically they rip a guy in half, and that's the only violent moment in the movie. And it's
That's
like,
disappointing.
but it's like a minor character, and you don't even really see it happen. Like he gets like the initial ripping kind of happens off screen, and then you just see like part of his body get thrown against a wall, and it's like oh, because one of the things I like about Neil Blomkamp's filmmaking is very visceral, and it's kind of like the violence in his movies kind of reminds me of like Paul Verhoeven, um, or it's really ridiculous. Like I remember in District 9, like people are just like blowing up, and then there's the moment in Elysium where the guy gets his face blown off, and then it gets like reconstructed, and it's like a moment out of like a David Cronenberg movie or something. And this movie was just kind of lacking in that. So either like if they had gone like a PG-13, I could have gone with that because it felt like that's where the movie maybe should have gone. But then if they really wanted to, play up the oh he's a kid gone bad or something like that, then just like go full on R. Just I don't know. It just felt it was one of those movies where it's like why has everything been so tame, and then you just have this one kind of it feels really unnecessary because it's the only moment in the movie.
It didn't go full Blomkamp.
No, and you always go full Blomkamp if you can.
But what if you Blom can't?
All right, that's it. We'll be back next week with a review of I don't know something else. We're canceling our Fear 7 review
Oh.
just because of that joke. No. So yeah, that was Chappie. And then also Paul and I saw It Follows. I don't know if we'll talk about that when Paul finally gets back in one of these. But that was a movie. That was a movie too. A lot of people were loving it. I liked it a lot. I don't think I liked it as much as other people do, but that's another one that's worth checking out. I don't. One thing I don't care for is a lot of people are like, "Oh my gosh, this is the best horror movie ever." Um, and it seems like this is kind of a cycle with horror movies, where every time a good horror movie comes out, people are like, "Oh my gosh, this is the first good horror movie in like 10 years." And I feel like, yeah, there's a lot of crap when it comes to horror movies, but I feel like we've had at least one good horror movie a year that you can't really be like, crapping on the genre the entire time. Because I feel like that's kind of like when good horror movies get good reviews, and like a lot of people who don't normally watch horror movies wind up watching them. That's kind of their go-to phrase is like, they don't make, they should make more horror movies like this. And I don't know, it just kind of feels unfair to, the movie you're reviewing and then all the other horror movies that come out every year.
Yeah, we're all horror movie fans here. I mean, you, Paul, and I think we can safely say are pretty big fans of the genre. So uh, we
Yeah,
see our fair share of good stuff every few years.
yeah, yeah. Like I said, I think you can find at least one really good one every year. So whenever people like act like this is a new phenomenon, it's like I don't know what you're talking about, but
Boom.
all right, whatever people see this movie, I guess.
Yeah.
So
Cool. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing that one too. Again, I probably won't get a chance to see it until I see it on VOD. But yeah, I
yeah,
really enjoyed it.
yeah, so that was it. That like all three of us, and like I said, Paul saw Cinderella, but that's like four movies in the past month. So not a lot has come out. Like we're kind of even though summer hasn't officially started, like Fury 7 kind of feels like oh now we're getting ready to be into the mode where we kind of go to the movies every week and it's a new giant movie as opposed to like looking at the calendar being like do I really want to go out and see that movie on the big screen or can I wait.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so now that we're kind of caught up on what's been in theaters, do you want to just do what you've been watching at home? Because yeah, I assume you've been doing a lot of at-home watching with the baby.
I have. Do you want to kick us off on that?
Yeah, I can do that. Actually, a lot of my a lot of my what I've watched recently is actually in the theater because I've been going to the New Beverly recently. Actually, not as much as I used to. March was kind of a low month for me. I only went like twice, which is kind of crazy for me. I usually try to go there once a week, but last week they had an awesome screening of Michael Mann's Thief, and that's a movie that I saw like 5 years ago. Before I came out here and everything. It was kind of one of those movies I've always been meaning to rewatch, and it holds up. It's an awesome movie. If anything, my major complaint about the movie is that I think if it were made today, it would be a TV show.
Really?
And by that I mean there are a lot of subplots in the movie. I don't. Have you seen Heat
I
before?
haven't. No, I haven't seen a whole
Okay.
lot of Michael Mann movies.
So, without spoiling anything, Al Pacino has, well, it's not his daughter, it's his girlfriend or wife's daughter, who's played by Natalie Portman, and there's kind of a minor subplot with her, and it's like, if this were a TV show, you would have gotten like more with that character. And then there's another character in the movie who's on Robert De Niro's crew in the very beginning of the movie, messes up, causes them a lot of trouble, leaves the crew, and winds up teaming up with the police or something at one point to get them caught. And there's like a moment where it's like he's like a serial killer, and that's kind of the only scene where it kind of addresses that. And it's like I feel like again, if it were a TV show, it would have elaborated on that. Where as of now in the movie, I guess it works just to kind of show that he's a bad guy, because he does terrible things to women. Um, yeah, that was the only negative thing I could think of, but it's like so insignificant, and you can't really blame a movie like that, which is, it's almost a 3-hour movie for having that kind of ambition and trying to tell that kind of level of storytelling before you could have told that on TV. If it were a movie that came out today, I could imagine being a little harsher on it, being like, oh, they should have cut that or whatever. The movie's also way funnier than than I think it has any right to be. I know like Al Pacino kind of has this um, over the top acting style that has kind of come out in the past 20 years, and I feel like his performance in that movie is right on the line between like it being acceptable because he doesn't do it all the time, and when he does it, it's more like when he's mimicking another character or he's like making fun of them. So I think it's in line and it doesn't become distracting. Although I feel like a lot of people, if they watched it today, knowing kind of how Al Pacino's style has progressed over the past couple of years, they would maybe find the movie unintentionally funny. But I think a lot of those moments are actually meant to be funny. Uh, so yeah, great movie. The fact that you haven't seen it yet, I would say I don't know if it's on Netflix, but if you ever get the chance to watch it, I would watch it right away. It's like 3 hours, but it goes by so fast.
Well, I should. To be perfectly honest, whenever I think of a Michael Mann film, the first thing that pops to mind still for me is The Keep, which is pretty bad.
You gotta do that for a phone with it sometime.
Oh, that'd be great.
Um, so then, coming a little more recently, actually, this past weekend, I went to a double feature of Boogie Nights and Train Spotting, which was an interesting double feature, and I couldn't really understand it until I was standing in line, and someone made the comment that if you take both movies as kind of a drug experience, like Boogie Nights is the initial high, and you're really like happy and excited, and then Train Spotting is like just like the downward spiral at the end of it all. And after coming out of both movies, I can say that is a very fair statement. I've seen Boogie Nights before. I like Boogie Nights before, um, which is actually interesting because coming out of it, I realized that I think I like Paul Thomas Anderson's later movies, like There Will Be Blood, The Master, and Inherent Vice, better than I like Boogie Nights, Magnolia, and Hard Eight. I don't know. It's kind of hard to go into without talking about it too much, but it almost feels like in Boogie Nights, like he's copying Scorsese, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it almost feels like he's relying too heavily on those types of techniques without realizing that what made those techniques work for Scorsese is there was a reason and purpose behind it. Whereas in Boogie Nights, that style is just like there's almost too much of it at times. It's still
Well,
a great
you know, I have yet to see a single Paul Thomas Anderson movie, but it just seems weird to me, just kind of looking at his later films and thinking that he did Boogie Nights, that he just I don't know, they just seem like two entirely separate styles of movies to me.
Oh yeah, especially if you had like a double feature of Boogie Nights and Inherent Vice, because those two movies, if you look at the trailers, look like they could be siblings, but then you watch Inherent Vice and it's way more in line with There Will Be Blood and The Master, and yeah, so they're two different types of experiences. But Boogie Nights is still a good movie, even if I don't think, I know a lot of people love the movie. I just don't think I can ever get to that point with it. I think I can sit there and be like, oh, this is a really fun character. This is a really fun sequence. There's actually a really good scene at the end with Alfred Molina. That's fantastic. But otherwise, like as a whole, like it feels very kind of like uh, this is going to sound like a really bad compliment, but it's like the ultimate student film. Uh, But like Paul Thomas Anderson was really young when he made this movie, so the fact that like I think calling it that isn't necessarily a bad thing, and I think he's found his style afterwards. It's just it's a movie where he feels like he's too reliant on stuff that he's seen before. Like he's got a great cast and whatever, like, but it feels like whatever he's bringing to the table, he's very much being kind of held back by it because he doesn't realize what he can do as opposed to like, oh, this worked for this other guy, so I'm going to do that. Train Spotting is just it's hard for me to recommend it because it's just such a like. There's something about British movies, especially like lower class British movies. Like Kess is kind of another example where it's just so down and dirty and depressing and whatever that. Even if it's like a good movie, like I never feel happy coming out of them, just because of just like England just looks like such a dreary place to be in.
Well, it is.
I know. And it just like that always drags the movies down for me. It's just like, man, this place just looks like a shithole,
Well, we only watch movies like Train Spotting, Kes. That's what you got to get out of it.
Yeah, I guess. It's still a really good movie, really imaginative. That's what I like about Danny Boyle. Danny Boyle is one of the most like energetic filmmakers I can think of, and that's why it's kind of interesting that he's doing that Steve Jobs movie because I think his style, not that his style doesn't work with Steve Jobs, but it's something I wouldn't expect. So it'll be interesting to see how he makes that work. So yeah, Train Spotting. Yeah, that's one I can't recommend as easily just because there's so much off the wall stuff in that movie that's kind of crazy. But it was definitely an interesting double feature. So
awesome. Had you seen Train Spotting before?
No, actually, yeah. So that was kind of my reason for going to the double feature was that like Boogie Nights was a movie I'd seen before and was like I liked it before. I want to see if it holds up. And then Train Spotting was one of those movies I've always had at the top of my Netflix queue. And just if given the choice between seeing a movie on the big screen and just sitting home at home and watching it on Netflix, I'd rather go see it at the theater if I can.
Awesome, cool. Well, to recap, unless you have anything else you want to add to that.
No, that's it.
Yeah, so to recap, some things I've seen recently. I watched The French Connection for the first time.
Nice.
Which it's weird. It's weird. Whenever I think of Michael Mann, I always think William Friedkin. I don't know. They seem to have similar styles from what I've seen, which is really
weird. I could imagine Michael Mann. Well, there's kind of an overlap actually with like Sorcerer. Sorcerer kind of feels like it could be a Michael Mann movie because Michael Mann used Tangerine Dream in Thief, and Tangerine Dream does the soundtrack to Sorcerer, and Sorcerer is also very kind of like a quiet, man's mission kind of a movie, and that's what. Michael Mann does a lot of movie about men. Michael Mann is a manly filmmaker. So there is a lot of overlap between him and Friedkin, especially around that time period.
Yeah, but anyway, French Connection is really interesting for me watching French Connection because I just recently watched Police Squad, which is totally unrelated, but Police Squad it makes fun of kind of these cop serials kind of movies, that kind of stuff. And I felt like I've seen a lot of those cliches that they were making fun of in the French Connection. I'm wondering, was French Connection kind of the buddy cop detective movie that kind of started them all?
Well, when did Police Squad come out?
I'm actually, I'm actually not sure about that off the top of my head. I need to do a little.
Because I mean, French Connection I wouldn't describe as a buddy cop movie, but
Police Squad was 1982.
Oh, so that was before like Lethal Weapon and 48 Hours, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean I don't think it's necessarily spoofing on just buddy cop, but just like cop movies in general. So yeah, I mean French Connection it would make sense if it was spoofing that to a degree.
Well, it was the scene in particular that I was thinking of is when they tear the car apart and they're looking for the drugs in the car and like I know this car is dirty. I'm like my gosh, it's just like a scene out of Police Squad. Only in Police Squad they find the stuff in the glove box instead of hidden elsewhere.
Oh, yeah.
That kind of stuff. But I don't know. It was interesting because I felt like I was seeing a lot of the kind of cliches that I'd seen in later buddy cop movies and detective movies just done before. Gene Hackman and Roy Scheider are fantastic in the movie. It is really interesting also to me how the entire movie is basically built up on chase sequences or people following each other. just like the entire movie, just people are tailing each other, or they're driving and they're running after each other and that kind of stuff. But they make it work. It's a really intense movie, surprisingly.
Yeah, that chase is great too. I remember there's a cool video. I don't know if it's on YouTube. I think I had to find it on like some other site. But William Friedkin, they apparently edited the famous chase sequence to Santana's Black Magic Woman, and so someone had a video where they overlaid that song on top of, in place of the whatever the soundtrack is on the movie, and there's certain beats that just match the cutting and the music and stuff like that. And it's really kind of cool because like on the surface level, it's like, oh, this song shouldn't work with this scene, but rhythmically, it's perfect.
That's really interesting. But yeah, I really enjoyed that one a lot, surprisingly so. I think Friedkin is quickly becoming a director that I admire a lot. He doesn't walk you through his movies, as in like he doesn't hold your hand, I should say.
Yeah.
He lets you figure out what's going on just based on what you're seeing, which at some points, especially if he's going across different countries, it can get a little confusing. But once you pick up on it, it's really gripping.
Yeah, I've been meaning to rewatch this one because I saw it like 4 or 5 years ago, and yeah, it's just been on my list where like I just feel like every couple of years, not that I forget what I feel about a movie, but I always feel like my opinion and like I've seen so many more movies by him that I feel like, going into it on a rewatch would be a completely different experience than the first time I watched it.
Yeah. A couple movies that I watched, Brothers Grimm, just kind of watched on a whim. Is on Netflix, so I watched it. I didn't realize going into it though that it was a Terry Gilliam movie, which made a lot of sense very quickly.
That's like one of his worst movies. Or that's the reputation.
I've always heard people say pretty terrible things about it. I've always presumed it was a disliked movie. I can see why. It's weird though because it falls very firmly into that category of I feel like there were a lot of movies. They're still making them actually, but especially in kind of the early 2000s, where they take fairy tales and legends and that kind of stuff and kind of make them into these more comical kind of action movies with lots of CG and over-the-top characters and that kind of stuff. Stuff on the lines of Van Helsing, or more recently Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I felt like this one fell into that, where they're taking classic fairy tales and kind of turning them on their heads as an action movie with steampunk elements and that kind of stuff. It was fun though. I mean, like it's a stupid movie, and the style is very bizarre just because it is Terry Gilliam. But I mean, it was fun. Heath Ledger is fantastic in that movie too. Just kind of, it's a very silly role, but he really gets immersed in it really easily. Matt Damon is just kind of Matt Damon, but he's always fun to watch. But I don't know. It was like stepping into a time machine into the early to mid 2000s, watching kind of these terrible CG effects and all that kind of stuff with these fantasy elements thrown in. So it's not a good movie by any means, but it was entertaining enough. And then finally, the other one I saw was Deep Blue Sea. And to be perfectly honest, I can't remember the last time I had so much fun just watching a movie. Have you seen this one, by the way, Nick?
I've seen the scene.
The scene everyone talks about, which is funny because I thought that took place during like the first half of the movie, but they wait a good ways until they hit the Samuel L. Jackson scene of note that everyone remembers. It's just, oh my gosh, this movie is full of the most ridiculous things. You have it's basically smart sharks, genetically enhanced smart sharks are killing off people in an underwater lab in the ocean. That's the plot to the movie, more or less.
You know what's funny is I always get this movie confused with it's a Paul Walker movie, Into the Blue. That's the other movie. It's Into the Blue and Deep Blue Sea. For some reason, like they were the same movie, even though they clearly are not. I think.
Yeah, but does Into the Blue have a chef killing off a shark by blowing him up with a lighter and an oven that's turned on because he's taking off revenge for his parrot being eaten?
I don't think so, but it does have Jessica Alba in it.
Oh, well, I guess that's true. I don't know. It's just kind of it's not a good movie, there's so much crazy kind of fun stuff going on in there, though. I just thoroughly enjoyed it from beginning to end. It's a big stupid movie with terrible performances, and terrible effects, but it indulges in what it is very very
Is
well, and
uh
so
is Rennie Harlan still allowed to make movies?
I don't think so. What was the last thing he did? Was it Deep Blue Sea?
Uh oh no, he's actually directed quite a bit since then.
Really?
Exorcist: The Beginning,
So no, he isn't.
12 Rounds, and oh, he directed the other Hercules movie from last year.
Oh, that makes. Oh my gosh! I didn't even realize that.
You
Yeah, yeah, it's
see
the same
that?
guy. I watched two movies of his last year. I watched Legend of Hercules and Devil's Pass. So so from what I've seen, this guy he makes good schlock. He makes good terrible movies.
He seems like the ultimate hack director.
Yeah, yeah, he is. But he knows how to make them. He knows how to make these terrible, shocking movies very, very well.
Yeah. He also directed Nightmare on Elm Street 4, and I knew he directed Die Hard too. It
Yeah,
actually is a pretty decent movie. It's just too much of a repeat of the first one.
yeah, yeah. It is. I mean, like we could get into a whole Die Hard thing if we wanted to, but it's not the best of them.
No.
So, but anyways, that's what I've watched more recently. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Sweet. Want to move on to film news?
Yeah. So we got a lot of trailers listed here. I
We have a
see.
lot of trailers, so we can talk about these pretty briefly. So I'll just go down the list real quick.
All right.
Final Mad Max trailer. Um, to me, it seemed like it was trying to give more plot, even though it seems like the movie doesn't have much of a plot other than it's a chase movie. I read a lot of people were like, "Oh, this trailer seems like it spoils a lot of stuff," but the trailers are all cut so frenetically and they're so all over the place that I have no idea what order stuff comes in and images just blur in my head. So I don't think watching this trailer will spoil the movie for anyone. I think I'll go in and it'll I'll forget half the images I saw in the trailer.
I still have no idea what the movie's even about, to be perfectly honest, despite what they've shown so far.
I know.
What's interesting to me is that I've seen a lot of people who had never talked about this movie before, talking about how excited they are for it based on this new trailer and how amazing it looks. To be perfectly honest, the first feature length or the first full length trailer to me kind of gave off the crazy and insane we don't give a crap what's going on feeling a lot better than this one does. I mean, this one still looks great, but I don't know, maybe just the music they cut it to and kind of the frenetic energy I felt like was missing from this
Well,
one.
yeah. Well, there were two. They've released two trailers so far. One was the Comic Con trailer that came out last July, and then there was the one that came out I think in December. And those
Mhm.
two were kind of similar. They just had like different music. This one,
Yeah,
this one though was trying to be a more mainstream trailer, even though it still has like all that frenetic stuff.
it feels like a real movie suddenly.
Yeah. But at the same time, I think the movie is enough of a not a traditional movie that the trailer can't help but still not feel non-traditional, if that makes any sense. Like
Yeah,
it's trying to make a traditional trailer out of the movie, but I don't think it can successfully do that because the movie just isn't built that way.
yeah. It's just interesting to me that from what I've seen, this one's caught the attention of more people from what I've seen, just like people I
I
know,
think,
than the first one did.
yeah, I think because it just might be because it's finally getting out there in the mainstream more, and people are just like, we're so close to this movie coming out. And actually, if there was an announcement that came out later today that Mad Max and the Avengers were trading release dates, I would be totally okay with that. I would, if given the option of seeing either one of these movies today, I'm picking Mad Max.
Yep, I wholeheartedly agree.
Um, okay, so moving on, we recently had the first trailer for Mission Impossible 5, Rogue Nation, which is crazy because I don't think we covered this on any of the podcasts recently, but this movie was supposed to come out in December, and then they realized, oh, we're coming out like a week after Star Wars, so we're going to bump it all the way back to July, which is kind of crazy for a movie of this size. But so now we have a trailer, and I'm pretty excited for it.
Yeah,
My
it looks fine.
yeah, my only concern is I feel like it's going to fall into the trap that every Mission Impossible movie does, which is Ethan Hunt is on the run, and everyone doesn't think the team is are good guys. Like it seems like every movie they're either on the run, going rogue, or they've been set up or whatever, and it's just like, is there no other plot for Mission Impossible movie?
Yeah, exactly. It's I don't know. To be perfectly honest, I loved the last Mission Impossible movie. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. Protocols, probably my favorite of the series.
Same here.
This new one, I was looking at the trailer. I'm like, yep, looks like another Mission Impossible movie. It looks fun. I'll probably watch it. Probably enjoy it. It didn't really do anything new for me, but it hyped me up enough.
I'm excited for it. I love the direction these movies have been going in, and again, we've compared this franchise with the Fast and the Furious, and so I might be able to give it a pass on that, where like the Fast and Furious movies, like the plots really don't matter. It's just kind of an excuse for like all these great set pieces and these characters and whatever. And so if that's what the Mission Impossible movies are, okay. I just kind of wish that they wouldn't always have to be on the run or dismantling themselves or whatever. But I'm really excited to see what kind of set pieces they pull off, because I think Ghost Protocol really set a high bar for this franchise, and it looks like not necessarily that they're going bigger, but they're going different. I mean, the plane sequence, you know,
Yeah, the plane sequence is all anyone's ever talking about anyway.
yeah. So I'm eager to see how that looks in the finished movie.
Yeah, well, we shall see. That effect looks great. It looks like an actual like practical thing that they're doing. So,
Yeah.
what do we have next? Spectre.
Yeah, this one I wasn't expecting this one yet.
Yeah, I had no idea it was even coming up. Honestly, I don't know. To be perfectly, I don't really have a whole lot invested in the James Bond franchise. It's fine. I've seen all the Daniel Craig ones. I really, really, really liked the last one, Skyfall. So I don't know. It looks like they're taking an interesting direction with the new one.
Yeah, I like everything that I'm seeing, except I don't know. It's weird because they haven't confirmed or denied that Christoph Waltz is Blofeld or not. Um, but I don't know how I feel about, hey, James Bond, and guess what? You have like a brother or a really like a childhood friend that's now a bad guy, and it's like, that's kind of a common trope that we're seeing in movies nowadays is, oh, we have the hero and then we have the hero's mirror, and it's like, didn't we just do that in Skyfall? So, um,
Well, no, they went back to his childhood roots, and they had like a mentor character.
yeah, it was like, it's funny that these Daniel Craig movies, it's like a 4-film origin story. Like each movie, it seems like is revealing a new part of his origin story, which is interesting. Um, I just hope they pull it off in this one, because I just want to see a good quality James Bond movie. I don't necessarily need to be dragged down by, oh, this is my childhood past and it was so sad and and whatever. So
Well, that one's coming up. We'll see if it changes the direction of the Bond franchise or just keeps on going where they've been going. We got Slow West, which looks interesting enough.
yeah, I wasn't. I mean, of course, if you say there's a new Western movie coming out, I'm automatically already there. And they had released a couple pictures, but that didn't really prepare me for the trailer, which looks way more playful than I was anticipating. It looks really kind of fun and not realistic. Like it almost looks like some of the images look like pictures out of like an illustrated book or something like that. The colors are really vibrant, and the way things are staged is very symmetrical. Like it's almost like if Wes Anderson did a Western.
That's interesting. I don't know. I hadn't really thought about that. I'm just excited to see Fassbender in this one. He looked really good.
Yeah, so I'm excited for that one.
Pixels. We got a trailer for that one too. I was actually disappointed by this trailer. I thought, I don't know, the whole idea of Pixels being like aliens invading because they think our message of like us sending our video games out into space. They mistake it as like a declaration of war or something like that. So you have like all these old '80s video games coming down to attack Earth, like a giant Pac-Man and Donkey Kong and that kind of stuff. I thought it sounded like it could be fun, even though it was Adam Sandler. It still sounded like it could be a pretty pretty decent comedy. Um, the trailer again, this is one which is kind of decent. It didn't get very many laughs out of me. It looked okay. I don't know. It just didn't really do a whole lot for me, to be perfectly honest.
It's funny because I remember when we started talking about this on the chat, you, me, and Paul, and I was surprised because I watched the trailer and I laughed at it. Like I don't think it'll be great or whatever, but I laughed at it and then I looked at it and you and Paul were just like, oh my gosh, this does not look good, and I was like, oh, okay. So I mean, like I don't remember the last Adam Sandler movie I actually went out and saw, so it's not like I'm in for his stuff, but it was just one of those things where it was like, yeah, I laughed. So
Well, it's Chris Columbus directing it, so maybe it'll turn out. I don't know. We'll see.
I'm really excited to see Peter Dinklage in this movie, but I love Peter Dinklage, so.
Well, he's fantastic. Then we got a new Poltergeist trailer, which is the second one we've had so far. Which this one's kind of been more on my radar recently because I love the first movie, and Sam Raimi's producing this new one. First trailer really didn't do anything for me. I thought it looked generic. It looked like every other kind of supernatural horror movie we've had in the past few years. This new one, though, it did more for me. I'm still not there yet, but I watched it. I'm like, oh, okay, this looks like it's a little more in the line of the first Poltergeist, and it's giving us something a little more unique. It's playing a little more fun and unique. It's not making it look like every other horror movie out there.
Yeah.
I think they're playing a lot. It looks like they're playing it easier or faster with the kind of the fantasy elements too, which isn't something that you see a whole lot in horror movies today. I think because in my mind, a Poltergeist movie really needs to be a movie that puts its focus on big presentation, on the effects and the fantasy element, which I hadn't really seen in this one up until now. So I don't know. I'm cautiously optimistic about it.
Yeah, this still hasn't done anything for me, and it might be because I'm actually not a big fan of the original for whatever reason. I don't know why. I feel like the '80s are kind of a weird period, just because there are obviously some great movies that came out of that time, but I feel like there are a lot of movies that people grew up on and love, but only because they kind of grew up on there. So like there are a couple of movies from that time period where a lot of people love them, and I didn't grow up on them, so it took me a while to get around to watching them. And then when I did, it was like, oh, it was good. It's just not on the level that I was hoping it to be, I guess. It might, I mean, and that might just be a problem with me and my own expectations. But Poltergeist is one of like the 3 or 4 notable ones from that time period where I'm like, people like it. It just doesn't, there are moments in it where it's like, oh, this is the movie I signed on for. Like when the guy's face starts coming off and the pool scene, and like there's some great scenes, but I don't know. It's just one of those movies that didn't work for me.
So the question is Sam Raimi going to produce this one the same way that Steven Spielberg produced the first one?
If that were the case, I would be more into it. Because I'm sure Sam Raimi could come up with some pretty messed up visuals if he wanted to.
Yeah. So, but speaking of actually, this isn't on our list, but I just want to do a quick throw in here. Have you seen the quote unquote teaser for Ash versus Evil Dead?
No. Did they already have a trailer out?
Not really. It's more like it's more like an animated poster than anything. But I don't know. It's kind of hit with me all of a sudden, like, oh my gosh, this is actually happening now. I mean, like I knew it was happening before, but like seeing anything official about it kind of hits it home a little bit more for me.
When's it coming out?
I don't know off the top of my head. I think it's coming out later this year, like the last half of this year. I'm not sure, honestly.
I'm excited for that.
So I am too. I'm really curious about what they're gonna do with it, but I don't know. It's kind of hit home for me, like it's actually happening. Holy cow! So, and then final bit of news that we have is the Deadpool announcement, which I have not been. Okay, this April Fool's Day, I have not been thrown through so many emotional changes as I was that day because of this announcement. Basically, there's been this whole controversy about whether the Deadpool movie, which they're finally moving forward on whether or not it's going to be R-rated, because everyone's been saying they have to make an R-rated Deadpool movie because violence, language, that's what Deadpool's all about. He plays it very fast and loose with the fourth wall, basically. And he's been all about making fun of himself. So Ryan Reynolds has been pushing for an R rating for this movie, but just been kind of presuming that they're going to make it a PG-13 because that's a superhero movie, right?
Yeah.
Um, so then earlier that day on April 1st, Ryan Reynolds he sent some tweets out joking about, well, not really joking about it, but it made it seem like it's official that Deadpool's going to be rated PG-13. And then later on that day, there was an official video posted. That's like it was an interview with who was the interview with again?
Oh, Mario Lopez.
Yeah, Mario Lopez. That's right. And at the end of the video, they pretty much announced that it's going to be R-rated. And now at this point, I'm like, I don't know what to believe because it is April Fool's Day still. And they've always thrown me through a loop so far. But apparently, they actually are going for an R rating with this movie.
Yeah.
Officially now, which is exciting.
Yeah,
So
it's funny because I'm finally coming around to the idea of what a PG-13 Deadpool movie was and kind of how you could make humor out of bleeping him.
yeah, or censoring things like Starship Troopers did a couple of points, like censored bars over gory stuff.
Yeah, so it was one of those things where I was almost like, part of me almost wanted to see a PG-13 version in theaters and then have an R-rated version on DVD. But now, of course, I've come back around to being like, no, let's see what the R-rated version in the. I would rather probably watch that in theaters because I feel like a censored Deadpool version. It would be funny if they did like the trailer that way, you know?
Yeah, which I'm sure they will. The
Yeah.
marketing for this looks amazing so far.
Yeah, I love that first photo that's meant to evoke the Burt Reynolds spreadsheet.
Yeah, well, yeah. I'm almost hoping that they do kind of make fun of the whole PG-13 and R thing in the movie itself. So I don't know. We'll see. So I think that's it for movie news, isn't it?
I think so. Unless you can think of anything. We've covered a lot of stuff because we haven't done this in a while.
It's been a while. It's been a long time, guys. So moving on to our Fastcast podcast, Furious 7.
I just love saying that. I'm pretty sure that's the whole reason we started that was because I came up with that and was like, that is such a cool way to say that. Like I can't let that go to, I can't let that go to waste. We have to do something with it.
You can't do that with anything else. Mission Impossible cast, Mad Max cast. Ooh, Mad Max cast.
But they don't. Mad Max cast actually sounds pretty good, but
yeah, maybe we'll have to do that one. Fewer movies.
Yeah.
So, Nick, what did you think of Furious 7?
What did I think of Furious 7? Okay, so this one is going to be the most interesting to talk about because this is a movie that Paul Walker's death hangs over. And in more ways than one. One is, obviously they have to create a proper send-off for his character, but two, because it happened halfway through shooting, they had to completely kind of rewrite the script and, possibly juggle some things around. So the entire movie there was always the potential that it would come off as a compromised movie, that it would never feel as whole as it was supposed to. And it was interesting, like how that's kind of been like the big thing that people talk about when they talk about this movie is Paul Walker, and yet watching the movie, I would forget that it was a thing that we were going to have to deal with until much later. So I was actually able to kind of enjoy the movie on its own ridiculous terms. That being said, I think this is one of the better ones in the franchise, but it's funny because we just finished doing our review of Fast and Furious 6, or Fast 6 as it should be referred to as. And it was interesting watching this movie because I was thinking about it and I was like, every problem I had with Fast and Furious 6 is the exact opposite problem that I have in Furious 7, which is that like in Fast and Furious 6, I felt like there were too many characters that were brought over from the previous movie, and it kind of like didn't allow you to develop any new characters. The problem I had with this movie is that I felt like there were too few characters because they had gotten rid of Han and Giselle, and then of course, unintentionally they have to get rid of Paul Walker, and just like there were all these kind of things where it felt like the team was a lot smaller than it was, and like it felt like we were kind of missing some beats and whatever.
And Dwayne Johnson wasn't in as much of this one either.
No, yeah, he's not in this movie a lot. And then kind of the action, while great and ridiculous, felt not quite as polished as the other ones did, but I'm kind of willing to forgive that because this is James Wan, who I'm sure you all have a lot to talk about. We're kind of a fan of his horror movies. This was his first stab at doing an action movie, and so I was really looking forward to see what he would bring to it. I don't think it's too different than what's come before, but I think the difference is that Justin Lin obviously had 4 movies to kind of get polished with, and then James Wan had this incredible burden of trying to hold this movie together when it threatened to all come apart because of Paul Walker's death. So it's interesting because there are a lot of, I think this is the most like globe-trotting movie that they've done, and yet I don't feel that the transitions between when they jump from one location to another were entirely seamless. It was just like, oh, we're going here, and then they were there, And for a movie like James Bond, that might work, but for here it felt like almost too much of a jump to go from L.A. to, I don't even know where they were in the mountains, but then they went to the Middle East and then they went back to L.A. and But that being said, I do think it's one of the better ones, and I think it's one of those movies where the particulars don't really matter, and in fact, the more I think about the finale, and we'll get into this later, is how inconsequential most of the movie is, and yet it just gives you everything you kind of want in a Fast and Furious movie. There's family, there's fast cars, furious individuals, especially in this movie. This is basically like a movie that's fueled by vengeance, so there's a lot of seriousness in this movie. And yeah, I just had a blast, and it was great to finally be able to see one of these movies on the big screen where I think they belong. So even though I kind of listed kind of all those negative things like I did with Fast and Furious 6, I actually enjoyed this one a lot. Yeah, so I'll let you take a stab at it now.
I first started getting really excited for this movie back when they announced James Wan would be directing it, because he is, I don't think it's a stretch to say that he's one of my favorite contemporary directors out there working today. All of his movies that I've seen have been pretty solid for me. Some more than others. Even his low points though, like Dead Silence, I still really enjoyed for what it was. So I was looking forward to this one just because I was like, oh, it's just a new James Wan movie. Of course I have to see it. But then my second thought was, oh, now I have to watch all the Fast and the Furious movies, which I up to this point have had no interest in seeing any of them. So it was interesting. It was interesting for me getting excited for a movie in a franchise that I had no interest in seeing any of the other films in the franchise up until this point. Until we did the podcast, obviously. That's when I first saw any of them. So then that was interesting for me, just kind of watching all those other movies leading up to this one, just kind of getting caught up on them while still knowing it's a James Wan movie. You can barely tell it's a James Wan movie, which may be in part because it's a totally different genre, but it works for the Fast and the Furious franchise, just because I think what he brings to his movies you don't really need in a movie like this. What you need in a movie like this is to bring the best elements of all the previous films and put them all into one movie to make a successful Fast and the Furious movie, which he does. I don't think it's by any means the best of the movies up to this day. I still put Fast 5 as my benchmark for the franchise. But is light years better than the worst ones.
Yeah.
You put that on the poster. It's better than the worst Fast and the Furious movies. But it was a lot of fun. My problems that I had was we talked in the Fast cast with Fast and Furious 6, with it being too sprawling and going about too much. There's even more of that in this one for me. This was the first one where at a certain point I kind of thought like, all right, let's just move on to the next action scene, and where are we gonna wrap this up at some point, which I hadn't really. I mean, like, except for maybe like the fourth movie in Tokyo Drift, I haven't really felt that any of these movies up to this point. But I would still say that this one is one of the better ones, just because the individual action set pieces are so great. The villain is fantastic. You have some great actors that come into this one. Jason Statham is fantastic. You got Kurt Russell has some pretty great lines.
Yeah, your James Wan moment was my Kurt Russell moment. I remember when they first dropped the trailer, and all of a sudden he pops up in it, and I was like, well, now I gotta see this movie,
Yeah.
Kurt Russell, it's a shame, but he doesn't do as many movies as he used to. I think like I think he's done a couple movies since Death Proof, but really like Death Proof was his last big movie, and that was like 7, 8 years ago. And now we have 3 movies with him coming out this year with Furious 7, Bone Tomahawk, and The Hateful Eight. So I'm just like, give me all the Kurt Russell I can can get, and it's like he doesn't have a big role, but in terms of like action stuff like that. But there are a lot of scenes where they're kind of like standing around. And it's kind of great to see him interact with these characters that we've grown to know and love over the past 6 movies.
Yeah. And then Dwayne Johnson also, who for me, he will always be the high water mark for this franchise. I just can't get enough of him. He doesn't have a whole lot to do in this movie, but every single moment he's on screen, he shines, like more so than I think he has in any of the films up until this point. And
yeah, he's really good in this movie,
phenomenal.
Even though he really just has like 2 scenes.
And he earns those 2 scenes so much. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I had a lot of fun. I know I've kind of been down on this one also, but I really did enjoy it. I watched it. I had a lot of fun. It's not the best in the series, but it's in the top half of the franchise, I'd say.
Yeah, I think this one is in the top 3 or 4 of the movies. I think it's safe to say it's definitely in there. Yeah, two of my problems that I kind of want to talk about is one is related to Jason Statham's character, and 2 then is related to kind of the MacGuffin of the movie, which is the God's Eye, which is basically this device where probably the fastest way to describe it is imagine the end of The Dark Knight when Batman realizes that he basically can see every cell phone and whatever in the city. That's basically what they have here, but on a global scale. And they basically, the deal that Kurt Russell makes is, hey, you get this for us, we'll let you use it to find Jason Statham. The problem I have with that, though, is that they never use it to find Jason Statham because Jason Statham just shows up wherever they are every 10, 15 minutes, So it's like, wait, what was the point of it?
Well, they use it once, when they find him in like the warehouse or whatever.
No, they don't. I guess they did use it then, but
yeah,
like
because they had Ramsey fired up and she found him. And that was the only time. That was like their big lead up moment to just kind of.
I know, but they didn't get him there. I don't know.
No, because he was waiting for them.
Yeah, I just kind of wish that had been a little more connected. But Jason Statham's character is interesting because and it's probably the thing that feels closest to James Wan's wheelhouse is because he's literally a ghost in this movie. I think my kind of disappointment with the character is that the best part is the very beginning.
Oh, his intro is amazing.
Because surprisingly, I guess Luke Evans' character somehow survived falling out of a plane in the last movie, or barely, because he's in a hospital bed. And Jason Statham's there, and he's basically like having his whole speech about how he's going to avenge him. And you kind of, he starts to leave the room. You realize that the nurse and the doctor are kind of in the background, and it looks like they're terrified of him. And it's like, okay, like that's understandable. But then he walks out, and you realize that like he's basically torn apart the entire hospital. And there's like SWAT team, like dead SWAT team people, like all over, and then he just like blows up the rest of the hospital when he walks out, or like part of it, and it's like, man, he really wanted to just see his brother.
And then his brother died because the hospital was destroyed.
I know. I was thinking about that. I was like, right before he leaves, he sets off another grenade, and it's like, okay, I don't think that killed Luke Evans. That doesn't, it's one of those things where it's like, did you really think that through? I don't know. But, yeah, I was just kind of hoping for – it's not that I minded that he would just, like, randomly show up. It's that I think he didn't need to show up some of the times that he showed up, Like, I'm trying to think of – because he's there in that first scene, and then he's at Han's funeral, and Dom chases him then, which I was kind of disappointed in that bit because I thought – oh, they're trying to make the audience think it's Jason Statham's character, but it's going to turn out to be Kurt Russell's character, which Kurt Russell shows up in that scene, but it was like, oh, we get a lead up to a Jason Statham fight that doesn't wind up going down. It's like, okay, that didn't really go anywhere. And then he shows up randomly in the forest, which is like, all right, you don't really need him because you have all these other bad guys there. and then he shows up in Abu Dhabi. But that's just cool. So I'll allow him just showing up in Abu Dhabi. So I think one of those two earlier times, or both of them, they could have eliminated him, and I think it would have made his presence throughout the movie stronger. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know if you.
Well, it's kind of like they spend the whole movie trying to figure out how they're going to find him, and they explain how our heroes are looking for Jason Statham, and they have to explain it every bit of the way. But whenever he just shows up for no reason, no logical reason that he would be there, they're just kind of like, he's just really good at what he does.
Yeah.
So, I was fine with that though because we did get some again, and this one we get some spectacular action sequences. Notably the cars don't fly sequence.
Oh, that's a great moment, especially because of, and I knew that's where they were going to go because in the beginning, Paul Walker is putting his son in the car, and his son keeps throwing this car, and he's like, "Oh, the car is flying," and he's like, "Cars don't fly," and you get the ultimate payoff of that when it's the shot in the trailer, so this isn't really spoiling anything, but when Vin Diesel and Paul Walker are trying to steal a car out of a skyscraper, and they realize it doesn't have any brakes. So they wind up crashing through not one skyscraper, not two skyscrapers, but three skyscrapers. And before they fly out the window, Paul Walker goes, "Cars don't fly down, cars don't fly down." And it was just such a great moment.
And those kind of moments were really why you watch these movies, for kind of the crazy, ridiculous stunts like that. The scene where they're dropping the cars out of the airplane, which again, it's in the trailers. Why they put all this stuff in the trailers, by the way?
That's what I was saying, because the build up to the drop is so good in the movie that I was like, I hate that I know what's gonna happen.
Yeah, exactly. Especially with Roman's banter there about like, I don't, guys, we really shouldn't be doing this. I can't do this. And you're like,
Yeah.
oh, what are you talking about?
Especially because when you realize that he unintentionally wound up creating that plan.
Exactly.
Yeah. Uh,
But
so I mean, that's not the movie's fault. That's more of a marketing thing. But it's one of those things where it's like, oh, I mean, I like that there isn't a lot of the finale in the trailer, so I kind of like that. There's a
yeah,
really good fight between Tony Jaa and Paul Walker. Um, yeah, I really like that bit.
yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy. Did you see any of the behind the scenes featurettes about the making of the car drop scene? By the way,
No, should
they
I?
they actually dropped some cars out of an airplane for some of those shots.
Did they really?
They did,
That's awesome.
which is just kind of ridiculous. And one of the stuntmen was saying that like he was afraid of like getting hit by a car, but he's like, how amazing would it be to put on my obituary, run over by a car while falling like several thousand feet above the ground.
That's awesome. And I think that's a problem that this movie has is we've talked about before how the Fast and Furious movies are always this balance between CG and practical sequences. And I feel like this one, not that a lot of stuff is CG, although some of it is, but I feel like there are some scenes like you're saying dropping cars out of planes for certain shots, and it's like I don't know if it's because I just find it hard to believe that they would do that, or if it's because there's CG used in that scene, so the whole scene just kind of feels like, oh, they didn't do that for real. Yeah, this one feels a little more CG reliant than the past two have been.
Oh yeah, definitely. Especially with this scene where they're jumping the car from building to building.
Oh yeah, but that I'm okay with because there's no way that is going to be done realistically.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't know. I just really loved the individual set pieces, which again is what these movies have become all about. Have been the individual action pieces, and they've gotten really really good.
But I think
James Wan has shown that he can direct an action scene really well.
But I think we have to understate that it's not just these set pieces that make them great, because I don't think that's necessarily a good enough reason to like these movies. And I think the thing that separates them, because like there are a lot of movies that are big, loud, dumb, action movies, and the Fast and Furious is certainly one of the bigger ones. But the thing that always makes these movies great is the characters. And it's not that, oh, they're the most multidimensional or complicated or well written or whatever, but you kind of get to a point with these characters where you just kind of love them and just want to hang out with them and just want to see what they're doing next. And especially with where the film ends up with Paul Walker's character, you kind of realize how invested you are in these characters. And I think that goes a long way when you have cars crashing and buildings exploding and stuff like that. Is when you still are like, oh, we're gonna catch up with what this character's doing, and how does this character fit into this plan or whatever. It's always that's the exciting thing about these movies is seeing how all these characters fit and relate to each other and interact and all that stuff. Whether it's when they're just standing around, at a barbecue or when when they're crashing through buildings.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that actually, are you ready to get into spoilers now? Because some character stuff I have to say, I should get into spoilers, I guess.
We can, but I think we should do a quick non-spoiler wrap-up, especially when it comes to like Paul Walker. Like, what do we think of like his send-off without spoiling it?
Okay, gotcha. So yeah, just a quick non-spoiler wrap-up. I quite enjoyed this one. I would recommend it if you're really into the franchise. Definitely go ahead for this one. It's one of the better ones, easily. It's a lot of fun. They do give Paul Walker a very fitting send off, I guess. um, yeah, it's one of the better entries in the franchise.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say, yeah, it's one of I would say it's probably one of the harder ones to come into if you've never seen one of the ones before. Just because I think it's so reliant on stuff that's come before, and whether you like these characters or not, especially with that the wrap up of Paul Walker's character, which I think I was thinking about it, and I was like, they couldn't have done a more perfect job of doing it, even if you were alive. Like maybe there were a couple things that, like, oh, since he's not around, like you can't add extra dialogue, or you can't maybe shoot it the way you want to. But I think as they presented it, it's like, man, they did a really, really good job with handling his character. So I think and it's kind of the most important thing in the movie. I feel like is how they handle that subplot, and we'll get into that in a lot more detail coming up. But yeah, I think if you're looking forward to this movie, if you're a fan of the franchise, I think you'll really like this one. I think in the spoiler section we'll have to talk about where we can see the franchise going from here, because it definitely, this movie to me, if all of a sudden they came out and were like, we're not making any more Fast and Furious movies, I would be like, okay, I'm content. Um,
Yeah.
but I think if they want to make Fast and Furious 8, 9, 10, or whatever, I think something will have to change, and I think there are hints of it in this movie. And I'm just curious to hear what you think about that. But we'll get into it in the spoiler section. So
Yeah, and also, if you haven't seen the previous films of the franchise, you'll just think it's one big Corona commercial.
it's very true.
It was fantastic. I've never been happier to see product placement in a movie.
I know it was that was yeah, because like there was a moment like that in the fourth Transformers movie last year where they have the Bud Light truck flips over and Mark Wahlberg drinks the beer in the middle of the street. But this was like, because Corona is such a part of the Vin Diesel character, like it was like earned a product placement, which I can't think of another example of that.
You should you should try the Belgian ale, man.
I wanted both after I came out of this movie, but
Get a case of
I
each.
I know.
So anyway, going on from here, we'll be talking about spoilers for Furious 7, spelled out Seven.
I looked it up. James Wan, yeah, James Wan put it that way as a reference to Seven Samurai.
Really?
Yep.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Huh. So anyway, talking more about in spoiler territory from here on out, talking about Paul Walker's send-off. Um, I was honestly surprised that they didn't do more with it, to be perfectly honest, because I felt like the ending they gave it was the ending we'd seen for him in the previous one, and the one before that, it was just kind of like, oh, okay, he's gonna go back to his family, and he's gonna quit the business, which it felt a lot more final this time, just because they had the whole Paul Walker tribute at the end,
Yeah.
and he can't be in any future ones. But for me, like I was kind of surprised that there was no definitive. He says like, I'm done for good, this time. And that's probably why they threw in the subplot of his wife being pregnant and everything like that to kind of make it a little more finite.
Well, I think so the movie was halfway being shot when he passed away, and I know it was the it was Abu Dhabi. They shot interiors for Abu Dhabi already, but it was like exterior stuff they hadn't shot, and then a couple other things. And I think they did a pretty good job because there were actually a lot of sequences where there weren't a lot of sequences where it stood out to me. There were actually only like two or three big moments. One where I could tell they did like the digital face thing was after they crash the car and they jump out of it in the third skyscraper, and he has some line about, oh, I got the chip thing that they were looking for. It was like, okay, that was a moment where it looked like that wasn't really his face. Obviously, him at the very end isn't him, although I think they actually did a really good job of that. And then there's one dialogue moment, because I know they took some dialogue from like the older movies and spliced it up, and there was only one moment where it sounded like two different takes combined together. But otherwise, I thought they actually did a good job of preserving that illusion.
Yeah. And for me, it was really because in the back of my head it was terrible. But in the back of my head, I kind of had this thought about like, oh, I wonder whether you're doing it when they aren't. But I was able to get immersed in the movie enough that it didn't overwhelm me. But at the very end was really the only place that I noticed it, to be perfectly honest. The when he's driving away. Other than that, it didn't really stand out to me at all.
Yeah, which is good because I think it's one of the most unfortunate aspects of the movie, and so I wouldn't fault the movie because obviously they want to pay homage to him, and they want to give his character a send off, so you don't want to get rid of everything that you shot. But at the same time, yeah, I think there were a lot of scenes where he would be in a conversation with someone, and I bet they would reshoot the other half. So if like he was talking to Vin Diesel, they probably shot Vin Diesel's part at the same time they shot Paul Walker's, but then 6 months later they reshot Vin Diesel's part and beefed it up so that it was more reflective of where they wanted the Paul Walker storyline to go, because they have a lot of moments where people are talking about the Paul Walker character without him being there, where they're all like, oh, like, Brian misses being in the action and stuff like that, and oh, Brian needs to settle down and stuff like that without it directly coming from him. So yeah, there's a little bit that feels like, oh, like obviously if Paul Walker were alive and they were trying to do this properly, they would probably have, some more compliant dialogue with him. But, otherwise I think they did a good job of patching it up as best they could.
Yeah, I agree. It was it felt enough like it was a Paul Walker tribute. So.
And that last shot, man, that's a good last shot.
Yeah, it was.
two cars driving in opposite directions. It was one of those things that, and then seeing all those images from the previous movies. I don't know. It's just one of those things where it's like, damn it, I've only been watching these movies for like a month, but I think it's because I've only been watching these movies for a month. But like I said before, when we started this whole thing, I'd seen bits and pieces or half of one movie on TV, and you always remember when you see trailers for them and whatever, and so Paul Walker's always been kind of in my consciousness in terms of the time when these movies came out, and I was he wasn't always the greatest actor, but I think he always lent a certain personality to these movies that I think they're going to be lacking in the future. And yeah, I'm going to miss him in these movies because I think he was the one who perfectly embodied the childlike sense of mischief and whatever that I think Vin Diesel doesn't have and none of the other characters have. So I'm really interested to see how they. I don't think they'll try to replace him, but.
Well, maybe we'll get more Dwayne Johnson next time around.
It'll just be the Rock and Vin Diesel show.
I'd be okay with that. It wouldn't be the same.
I would be too. Oh gosh, what else do you want to talk about that's spoilerific?
I guess just Dwayne Johnson in the end was amazing. Just kind of
yeah.
Because okay. So the whole movie he's out of commission because he got into a fight with Jason Statham that ended in an explosion and it put him in the hospital for the majority of the movie.
Yes.
Until the very end when he sees that there's that's the thing is that he can't have any idea what's going on. He just knows that something's going on from his hospital room. And he sees that there's explosions in the city and buildings are coming down because of the final chase between Jason Statham and the main characters. So he just kind of gets up, just kind of breaks his cast open nonchalantly, gears up, and just says that he's gotta go to work. And he walks into the city and fixes everything,
Well, he doesn't just walk into the city. He like hijacks an ambulance, and then he crashes the ambulance into a drone, a flying drone.
which is amazing. And then he takes like the machine gun off the drone, and
Shoots
I
down
think
the
he takes out like
helicopter.
a helicopter or something. And it's just I love how he knows where he needs to be at any given moment, despite there's no reason that there's no possible way he could know like what's going on.
Not at all. Not at all. That's
And it's amazing.
it's moments like that. Like that was the moment where I applauded in the theater because I was like, that is what I want out of these movies.
My favorite line in the movie, also, by the way, was also the most terrible pun I think I've heard in any of these movies. Was at the very end, Vin Diesel and Jason Statham get into a big fight with each other, and there's a throwback line to they got into a fight earlier in the movie, and Vin Diesel grabs like a piece of metal, and Jason Statham basically says like, "What do you think this was going to be, a street fight?" And he pulls out a machine gun or something. So he references that later on because in the finale they get into another fight on top of a parking garage. Um, and Vin Diesel basically says, "What do you think this was going to be, a street fight?" And he's like, "Absolutely." And they get into a fight. But then towards the end, the parking garage gets all cracked up, and Vin Diesel says, "U.S. problem with street fights is that the street always wins."
Yeah. Well, then I love at that moment because then he stomps on top of the garage, the top level of the garage, and it collapses and brings Jason Statham down with it, which is great because in that moment, Vin Diesel has basically turned into the Incredible Hulk. And earlier in the movie, The Rock is watching the old Incredible Hulk TV show on TV, and Vin Diesel is like, "Oh, this is a ridiculous old cheesy TV show," and yet Vin Diesel becomes that character in the end, basically.
And it's fantastic. I thought Jason Statham died in that moment until the very 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 end. Their post credit stinger that's before the credits. Um, they show that he's locked up in some maximum security place so that they can bring him back for future installments, presumably.
Yeah, I think that was another level of my disappointment with that character, which is like, I don't know, they build him up to be this big baddie, and obviously, like, if it's a great villain, you kind of, sure, you want them for more movies and whatnot, but I don't know. I feel like again it was pushing off the inevitable for wherever they're going to take the franchise in the future. I don't know. No, it'll be interesting to see what they do with this character.
Yeah.
Um, Kurt Russell's character, I think, is the key to the next movie, though.
Yeah.
And part of that is because Vin Diesel's already said in the interview that he wants to set the next one in New York. And of course, when you put Kurt Russell and New York together, you get Escape from New York. So I don't know if there's any validation to that theory, but Kurt Russell gave me a very interesting sci-fi tinge at the end because there's a scene where they track down Jason Statham to this warehouse, and they realize that they're outnumbered and they're getting shot at, and then Kurt Russell puts on night vision sunglasses and then just starts shooting up all these bad guys, and it's a really cool but all too brief action sequence before he gets shot, and you think, oh my gosh, he's dead. But then later, he like shows that he has some type of bulletproof armor underneath, but it doesn't look like any bulletproof armor I've ever seen. But then apparently he's also, even though he was shot in the armor, he was also, shot in a vital spot. So he's like, oh, just leave me off on the side of the road. I got my own life insurance coming to pick me up. And it just all felt like there was more to this character. Like he's part of some secret government program or some secret trooper or soldier type of thing. So that I have a feeling that the franchise is going to go maybe not overtly sci-fi, but I feel like it's going to go
Conspiracy theory.
Yeah, well, because I feel like the movies have gone from car racing movies to heist movies to espionage movies and I feel like they're still kind of in the espionage territory, but they're going into like a more global. I don't know how you want to put it, but I feel like there are hints of where they're going, and I just don't know how to properly articulate it.
Well, I guess we'll see in future installments, as I'm sure there'll be plenty more to come.
Yeah, and that's the question is like how do you top this or how do you go forward? And it's like one of those things where like I feel like they either have to go smaller and then go bigger again, or they have to I don't know. I think the next one is going to be. I hope it's like another Fast Five where they give us another reevaluation of the whole series.
Well, hopefully, it seems like they're heading towards that. I think we're due for one about now anyway. Did you notice also at the end of the end credits is where they posted the "Do not try any of the stunts in this movie"?
I
Or
think, which is the first time since the first one that they've done that.
yeah, not at the very beginning of the credits, at the very end of the credits, because at the very beginning of the credits we needed the for Paul. It would have been really weird if we had for Paul and then don't do any of the stunts in this movie.
Well, especially because I mean he died in a in a car accident, so it would have I think it would have felt insensitive to right after that be like for Paul. Well, the whole reason this is for Paul is because blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
Um, oh, one plot point we haven't talked about yet is Letty still has amnesia in this movie, but she gets all her memory back because of love.
Yeah.
and Vin Diesel looks like he's gonna die, and Paul Walker tries to give him CPR, but then he comes back to life because of love. And basically, I thought about it, and I was like, that totally makes sense. Like instead of falling into a vat or getting bit by a radioactive spider, all the characters in this franchise got their superpowers because they started loving each other.
Well, we all have the Matrix Revolutions to blame for that. Ever since then, all these movies, Interstellar and all this stuff has to be about love, suddenly, the power of love.
But yeah, so we had a little retcon in this movie where we find out that either before the fourth movie or like in between scenes in the fourth movie, Dom and Letty got married.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah.
That was yeah.
When could that have happened? I was thinking about that during the movie. I'm like, when could that have even happened?
Well, it either happened in between the short film, the Los Bandoleros short film, and the actual movie, or it happened in between the scene where they get their money and then they go to sleep, but then Vin Diesel leaves. But that doesn't make sense why Vin Diesel would marry her and then leave right afterwards.
But it couldn't have happened in the short film, or between the short film and the movie, though, because the short film leads like directly into the movie. Like they're going off to the job that they have in the movie.
I guess the movie was right before the short film. I don't know. It's somewhere in that area of the timeline. But that was like the cherry on top of the soap opera storyline of Letty gets amnesia.
And hopefully we're done with it. So we can get more Kurt Russell with Space Vest.
That's seriously all I want to see. Like, I would be totally okay if they said everyone is leaving the Fast and Furious franchise except Kurt Russell.
Kurt Russell's like, I want to drive fast cars now all of a sudden. So, anyway, we should probably wrap this up about now. We're running on almost an hour and a half on this podcast. But, yeah, final thoughts. I enjoyed it. It's a lot of fun. I'm really curious to see what they do with future movies, especially considering that they have to reevaluate the not just the team, but the genre and the characters they have in there now. So yeah.
You know what Vin Diesel should do?
What's that?
You should go to see Mad Max Fury Road.
I would love if this series all of a sudden just went full post-apocalyptic or something crazy like that.
Well, I mean, California is supposed to run out of water in the next year, so just like
yeah. So how are they going? How are they going to address that?
Exactly. Just turn it into Mad Max. Be like, oh my gosh, in the year since.
So, do you have any final words?
I like this movie a lot. I thought it was a lot of fun. I obviously, it's got its problems, but I think I'll just call it the Paul Walker effect. But I think this movie does so right by his character and by the rest of the characters too, and just kind of like gives you what you want out of the franchise, that I think whatever plot contrivances and plot holes and problems I have with it are a lot easier for me to overlook, knowing the other things that they got right with this movie. Yeah,
I agree. One last question is that they haven't locked down a director for the next movie yet, have they?
No, I don't think it'll be James Wan because he's doing The Conjuring 2. And I know they like to get these Fast and Furious movies out every 2 years or whatever. And I don't think it'll be Justin Lin because Justin Lin is doing the next Star Trek movie, which is supposed to come out next year. So I'm actually excited for that because I think Justin Lin, um, I think as weird as it sounds, I think the Fast and Furious franchise and Star Trek kind of have some overlap when it comes to they're both franchises that are really good at diversity. You know, there are a lot of great female characters in both franchises. There are a lot of great minority characters in both franchises, and I think Justin Lin is kind of the perfect person to carry that forward for Star Trek.
So the final question comes down to, though, who would you like to see direct a Fast and the Furious movie? You could choose anybody out there working today.
I had an answer, and I can't remember what it was. I would love to see Vin Diesel take a crack at it. It would be a completely different movie. Who would I like to see? I don't know. I feel like I had an answer a couple days ago, but I can't remember. Do you have one?
I don't really. I was thinking about it though, because I think really interesting if you saw someone who wasn't used to doing this kind of movies. I mean, like kind of like we've seen what James Wan did with it, but it would be interesting if you took someone else, you know, kind of like a what's his name? What's the guy who did Looper? That'd be interesting to see his take on the Fast and Furious movie. What's that?
Ryan Johnson.
Yeah, which obviously he's too busy with Star Wars at the moment, but it'd be interesting to see his take on it. I think.
I would love to see. They should bring Rob Cohen back from the first one.
That'd be amazing. There we go. Bring it back to its roots.
I wonder if he's seen the rest of the movies.
I don't know. He's out doing his own thing right now.
He was the one who kind of had the idea for the first movie because he saw all this street racing happening in L.A. and.
And now, what does he think of the franchise? If he came back, he should bring it back to a street racing movie, just like a simple street racing movie with Kurt Russell involved.
That'd be amazing.
All of a sudden, Tarantino's Fast and Furious 8.
I would be really down for that, but I feel like he already did that with Death Proof. So
I would be down. Actually, honestly, I would be down for Robert Rodriguez take on this.
Oh my gosh, no,
that would be amazing.
That's kind of perfect.
Especially if Kurt Russell was involved.
Because you get Kurt Russell, then you add Danny Trejo, maybe throw in Antonio Banderas,
and make it a street racing movie in New York.
Yeah, because we all know. I mean, Robert Rodriguez is a big Escape from New York fan. So you just get. Oh no, dude, just get John Carpenter. Just bring John Carpenter back from retirement.
There we go. You have a kick-ass soundtrack at least.
John Carpenter's Fast and Furious 8.
So anyway, I think that wraps it up for us, more or less here. Yeah, unless you have anything else.
No, that's it.
Alrighty, so you find us on the-letterbox.com. Find out more of our podcast entries. We have a lot of great ones in the past there. Also, check out our Fastcast podcast, which is also on this YouTube channel. Nick and I talk about all the other Fast and the Furious movies in the franchise. Find us on Twitter, Facebook, all that good stuff, and check out our web series, Film Litters, which is every other Thursday. So, alright, take it easy.